So here we go with a quick podcast review about the Aztec, or as we all know now, the group that we're really going to call the Mexica, the group that lived in Tenochtitlan. So their story begins with the fall of the city of Tula. Tula is up there kind of just outside the northern boundaries of what will be the Aztec Empire. When Tula fell, its residents kind of migrated out to the east, and we know where they went. They went to the Yucatan, they went to Chichen Itza. We don't need to talk about them now. We dealt with them with the Maya. So the people from Tula, the Toltec, they leave. And what are we left with? We have a power vacuum right around there in the Valley of Mexico. So what happens? These groups, these barbarian type groups from the north, the people who are called the Chichimecs, they start to migrate down. And different groups of Chichimecs migrate down over about 200-300 years. And they begin to settle around Lake Texcoco in the Valley of Mexico. And that lake, that's our key geographic feature for this region. So these Chichimecs, the Mexica were one group of Chichimecs. And remember, Chichimec is not an ethnicity, it's not a city. It was really just a derogatory way of speaking of people. Dirtbags, scumbags, people from the north, barbarians, less cultured people. So the Mexica are really the last of the Chichimec groups to arrive to the Lake Texcoco area. All the other cities were settled first, and really all the good land was taken. They end up on the island, the Mexica, and they're going to found the city of Tenochtitlan. We watched that short documentary in class, and of course we heard the great story of part of the reason they ended up there. They were chased out there. Their behavior was so appalling to other groups that they were, in effect, banished to that island. Either way, the Mexica end up there on the island in the middle of the lake, and you should remember that lake is not ideal. Half of it's brackish water. They had swampy land. They were not set up to succeed, but yet they do. And part of the reason they succeed is because of this guy, Itzcoatl. He is the fourth king of the Mexica, the chief of Tenochtitlan, and he is the founder, or one of the founders of the Triple Alliance, the alliance between Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. And together, those three cities kind of turned the tide in the Lake Texcoco, Valley of Mexico region. The three of them unite to defeat Azcapotzalco. That had been the dominant city, the one making them pay tribute, and they turned the tide on Azcapotzalco. They had teamed with Texcoco, whose leader, Netzahualcoyotl, pictured here. Yes, that's a tough name. He was really key in the founding of this Triple Alliance, too. The Mexica could not have done it without Texcoco in the beginning. Yes, the Mexica, Tenochtitlan, will become more powerful. They'll become the dominant force in the Triple Alliance. But this guy helped to get them there, too. And, of course, he helps to build the aqueduct. He helps to build the dike that goes across the lake. So he was key in their early success. If Texcoco wasn't as important later, they were in the beginning. So what happens next after the Triple Alliance defeats Azcapotzalco? Basically, the Triple Alliance explodes out of the Valley of Mexico. They begin conquering other groups, being led by Itzcoatl and Netzahualcoyotl in the beginning, and later, of course, other kings who will really leave their mark on the region. These guys take over much of central Mexico. The empire might have included as many as 20 million people. And what happened as they conquered? Well, warriors really kind of reaped a lot of the benefits. Warriors kind of gained titles over lands, and not just the lands, but the people who lived there. Essentially, they were controlling the people's labor. What was happening is you had a type of feudalism being created in central Mexico, something that was going to be familiar to Europeans when they later arrived, and that is important for our story, that what was laid down there in the 1400s is very much like feudalism. You had a small nobility ruling over a poor, agricultural-based peasantry. So the Mexica army. At the top, we have our jaguar warriors, we have our eagle warriors. These are our elite, elite type of leaders. In terms of the weaponry, you see a little diagram here of an atlatl. This was the spear delivery device. It helps people to throw spears over 100 meters. I mean, that's over a football field. So one of their distance weapons was the atlatl. Another distance weapon was the sling. They would use a kind of string rope sling to project clay balls at people across the battlefield. And then you had various obsidian weapons. This was the maquawit, this was the obsidian sword, and of course we also have the obsidian dagger, which you all have seen and gotten to hold actually in class. And how did you become one of these guys pictured here? How did you become a jaguar warrior or an eagle warrior? As per this next step-by-step kind of manual by taking captives. That's what all of these people are doing here, taking captives, and taking captives to bring back to Tenochtitlan for sacrifice was the way to move up the military ranks. Doing so ensured more privileges, better food, better home, access to alcohol, and really, in general, just a better life. They rewarded their warriors well. Now let's turn back to the city of Tenochtitlan, the impressive city they built, and this drawing doesn't really do it justice. This was one of their drawings, but you do see the basic components of the city that do impress Spaniards later when they arrive. We see the causeways. There you cannot tell, but these causeways were 3 miles in some places. You have the dike in the back there that separated the brackish from the fresh water. We see canals running through there. We see large pyramids. By all accounts, this was an incredibly impressive city, and the Spaniards, they were impressed. Looking at a different view, this view that Cortez drew when he actually arrived in 1519, we see the Chinampas out there on the outskirts of the city. This is where our farmers live. This is where the city grew some of its food. We know it did not grow a lot of food there. It actually could only grow 5% of its own food. And so the city's limited geography, while it was impressive the way they dealt with it, the way they built Chinampas, the way they built causeways, the way they built canals, it limited them and it forced them to go conquering, looking for resources, looking for tribute to feed their people. This final view, the view that actually started the podcast, it's a Spanish view of what Tenochtitlan looked like. And once again, they are impressed by what they see. By all accounts, it was the most magnificent city that most of them had seen. Maybe Cortez had seen something better, but for most of these guys who had seen rural Spain, Andalusia, this was absolutely the most majestic, impressive place. Huge markets, huge pyramids, floating gardens. The city really had it all. They were blown away by what they saw here. Finish just with a few points here about culture. We know that they had a lot of sacrifices here. It's something we talked about in class at length. But there was a more cultured, artful side to that. Even to the sacrifices, which were accompanied by lots of music. They were big on drums. They were big on whistles. We listened to the death whistle in class. And rattles were also a popular instrument. Rattles, of course, to be a little bit morbid, of course, contained sometimes human teeth to provide the sounds. A couple of final thoughts about culture. The Aztec groups, whether they were Mexica, Tlaxcalan, Texcocan, whatever, they used a calendar that was very similar to the Mayan calendar. It had a solar calendar of 365 days and a ceremonial calendar of 260 days. The number system that they used in the Aztec world also mirrored the number system used by the Maya, our system based on 20 with a shell as 0. They wrote, but they did not write phonetically like the Maya. Their pre-conquest codices are pictorial. They lack the rich phonetic writing that the Mayan did have. Post-conquest codices, though, as you'll notice here, really changed. They begin to draw more realistically, almost kind of drawing like Mayans already had been drawing. And what they do is they begin to use our alphabet to write. And you can actually see a couple words there you might recognize, cacique, and that is another word for chief. And so that brings our look at the Aztec, specifically, really, Mexica and Tenochtitlan to a close. Good luck on tomorrow's test.